in a minute. I'm about to go live and we're going to chop it up. So I want to talk about something, guys, that's dear to me. I want to talk about something that's dear to me. And as a clinical professional, there's a lot of ignorance around the therapeutic process. As a clinical professional, there's a lot of ignorance around the therapeutic process. There have been a lot of people that have been, how can I say the word, besmirched by therapy because they don't see value in therapy. And I get it. I understand why they don't, because sadly, the profession now, some could argue, is tied to neo-wokeism or neoliberalism. And if that's your thing, I don't have a problem with it. If that's your thing, and woke therapy is your thing, I don't have a problem with it. But the problem is, black people traditionally have been conservative. Black people, or Americans of African descent, have traditionally been conservative. They've been traditionally conservative. And many have a bad taste in their mouth, or some have a bad taste in their mouth over the therapeutic process because, number one, some don't understand it. Number two, there could be unconscious biases, we call it in the clinical unconscious pathology, associated with the therapeutic process. And then number three, many don't want to do the work. So there's a lot of ignorance and denigration of the profession of clinical therapy. Therapy is very powerful, and it's very powerful under certain scenarios. It's very powerful if you get a competent therapist that is culturally competent, but also a therapist that understands you and understands your worldview. But if you get with a therapist that more or less understand the book concepts of therapy, but they don't know how to apply it in all areas, then it becomes most problematic. And so the question on today is, does therapy suck? Why therapy suck? And why some people don't respect the therapeutic process. And many times men are looking for male therapists that understand them and their worldview. And they're looking for traditional heteronormative therapists that understand them and their worldview. But therapists, guys, are people, and therapists have their limitations. And the quality of your therapist can be predicated on many things. If you got a young therapist out of college, it doesn't mean they don't understand therapy, but they don't have experience. And so they are evolving as a therapist. And as clinical professionals, we are expected, for the sake of licensure, to get at least 40 clinical units every 2 years, because the knowledge should either replicate itself through what's called empiricism, or we should have new knowledge based on what we learned from the past. Good therapy is based on evidence-based practices. But you know what baffles me and make me upset and angry? You got a lot of armchair therapists on YouTube that are extremely ignorant. They don't know how therapy works. They take their limited anecdotal experience and apply all therapy to their limited anecdotal experience. And I don't have a problem if a person more or less appraise therapy or appraise therapists and say, you know, that therapy has its issues. I don't have a problem with that if you do it in fair judgment. But the problem with a lot of people, they don't do it in fair judgment. They'll make a pronouncement about therapy, but they don't damn understand. They don't understand. They don't know how it works. And they'll look at TikTok or look at like that goofy lady, the TikTok therapist, and they will assume that all therapists or therapy is the same. And therapy doesn't work that way. It's a very broad profession. It's a broad profession that's based on medicine. It's a broad profession that's based on research. It's a broad profession that's based on understanding how to integrate soul, body, mind, and spirit. It's a broad profession that's based on theories. It's a broad profession that's based on implementation, and it's a broad profession based on the lack of cultural competence and when it comes down to educating and teaching other people. And so if you don't understand how therapy works and how therapy impacts a person, you'll go into therapy thinking that therapy is the worst thing in the world, but therapy can be powerful if it's utilized properly. If you're a traditional conservative man, then you might not like therapy, because therapy, a lot of therapy now, not all of it, but you tend to find a lot of woke therapists. They tend to push more liberal agendas and liberal pedagogies or ideologies. So if you're dealing with therapists like that, well, then of course you're not going to like therapy. It's not, you know, it might not work for you. But I would say that if you want to get the best out of therapy, you need to get a therapist that understands your worldview, or a therapist that more or less applies or understands your worldview. But as I said a few seconds ago, therapy is very broad. It's very broad. Therapy is very broad. And finding the right therapist is everything. Finding the right therapist is everything. The more you know what you need and the more you find incompetence in the therapist, the better. But as I said before, armchair quarterbacks that come on YouTube that are ignorant and don't understand the therapeutic process, they would denigrate the whole profession based on what they've been through or based on what they have seen. And many times they make a false proclamation without understanding in all professions have their great therapists, they're great, they're good, they're okay, and they're poor. All professions have good, great, good, okay, and poor. Can you imagine, guys, if a person say, well, you know, all doctors are trash, if there was a bevy of conversations where how can I say it? If there was a conversation where in the past where they've had a conversation about people having issues with doctors, and all the doctors they encountered were bad, and I get it, especially in the black framework. Black people have not always trusted medical professionals or therapy because it's something that was not necessarily germane to black people. But getting the right therapist is everything. And don't listen to a lot of folks on YouTube because they are ignorant. They don't know the profession. They don't understand it. They don't understand the different apparatuses behind therapy. They don't understand that competent therapists become sharpened over time. Listen, the problem with many therapists is this, and I understand why people say what they say. You can go to school, you can learn everything based on what you went to school, and you can have a condition called rote memorization. You remember everything, but you don't know how to apply it. What makes a person a competent therapist is a therapist that know how to apply what they've learned in school, and they know how to make it applicable to all environments. When you can successfully do that, then that's a sign that you're a great therapist. Shout out to my man, Professor Mac. He said, I did the work, I wasted so much time. No doubt, I respect that, brother. But when you can do all of that, then you can become a great therapist. You become a great therapist when I'm not a great therapist, you become a great therapist when you put in the work, you know how to apply the work into all areas and all domains, and you strive to understand different populations. Therapy is an art, and therapy is a science. It's an art and a science. Therapy is an art when it comes down to more or less disseminating or giving it to others. That's the art of therapy. But therapy is a science once you understand the theories, once you understand the different frameworks, once you understand cultural competence, once you understand all those areas, then that helps you become a better person. But many people don't understand therapy. They don't go to therapy. They minimize therapy, and they don't want to do the work associated with therapy. And then they'll turn around and blame therapy and say, well, therapy don't work. But they don't look at themselves and say, I didn't do the work in order for therapy to work. You can have the most competent doctor, you can have the most competent neuroscience, you can have the most competent people in general. But if you don't do the work, you're not going to get the best outcomes associated with the therapeutic process if you don't do the work. If you're not in alliance with your therapist, you're not going to get the best outcomes. So be careful, guys, when you listen to people on YouTube, and some mean well, and I don't mind people I'm talking about the profession, because they are right. There are incompetent people in therapy. There are some incompetent therapists. But then if you're going to talk about incompetent therapists, then you need to talk about incompetent accountants, incompetent teachers, incompetent lawyers, incompetent preachers. Incompetence runs in all professions. So you can't castigate the whole profession based on your anecdotal experiences and make that equivocable to all. You can't do that, because that's disingenuous. But when you get the right therapist that know the right treatment models, and you get with the right therapist that know how to help you unpack some of your things that you're dealing with, then that's a good therapist. One of the things I hear so many times from some YouTube content creators, I listened to a guy yesterday, and he was partially right and he was partially wrong. He was right when it comes down to saying that many people pathologize therapy, pathologize everything, and everything is trauma. I agree with that. But then on the flip side, there is some people that are going through traumatic episodes, and they're projecting that to other people. Instead of being on YouTube, they need to continue to unpack and do the work, because the same people that say everything ain't traumatic, they have been dealing with trauma themselves, but they do a good job of masking it, or they use a concept called sublimation to overcome it. And that's what makes their lifestyle, their scenario totally different. But there's a lot of mental illness in America, not only in the Black community, but also in America. The lack of self-awareness, unresolved issues from their childhood, lack of boundaries, lack of respect, lack of empathy. There's a lot of distress going on. And many times, guys, I did a show in the past called The Trauma That My Daddy Went Through That No One Talked About. And we're going to get into this Rainey case in a minute. But when you get the right therapist to help you to unpack and see the error of your ways, then you can become a better person. But you have to do the work. And then doing the work, guys, that's called a therapeutic alliance. In order to grow and heal in the therapeutic process, you have to have a therapeutic alliance. You might say, what is a therapeutic alliance? Well, that simply means that when me and my therapist come together as one, we're on the same page, we're doing the work, and we're trying to get the best outcomes long term. But if you get a therapist where you're not aligned with that therapist, and you're just going to therapy only to confirm your biases, only to confirm your pathologies, only to confirm your BS, then you're not going to get the best outcomes. And there was a Black woman, guys, that did a show, or she did a clip on YouTube, and she was saying that anytime she called out Black women, and they can go for Black men too, but specifically Black women, on their BS, they abruptly left therapy and stopped going. And I can believe that. Because, see, when you go in front of a therapist, a good therapist's job is to give you the right treatment model, but also a good therapist's job is to get you to unpack the issues that you're dealing with. And one of the things I think people forget about me is that when I go on YouTube, I'm a man first that happens to be a clinical therapist. So when I'm on YouTube, I'm being my true authentic self. You'll see more of my authentic self when I'm on YouTube. But many think because I'm a professional that I gotta act professional or act as a professional as I'm in the office all the time. No, when I'm on YouTube, I'm talking as a man that happens to be a therapist. And while I can use clinical concepts, if you get out of line with me, I'm gonna turn into a man first. I'm gonna always be a man first. There ain't gonna be none of that profession because you're not my client. And so on YouTube, we can't treat people anyway because that's unethical. But when you get a good, competent therapist that can help you unpack, then you will not be an armchair quarterback like a lot of creators on YouTube. Some of them mean well, and some of them are extremely ignorant. They're armchair therapists, and they'll say, oh, therapy don't work, it's a waste of time, it's a sham, it's a fraud, and that's a lie. You don't understand what you're talking about. You didn't go to school for it. You don't understand how the therapeutic framework works. And you take those randomized samples or those randomized experiences that you see on YouTube or those associated with other people, and you form an analysis based on the lack of evidence and also lack on the base of evidence and also lack of knowledge. And so, as I said earlier, I don't have a problem with people formulating opinion. I don't have a problem with people formulating opinion about therapy. But you need to make sure when you're formulating that opinion, you're formulating that opinion based on training and also based on knowing what you know, not just your basic opinion and you don't know what you're talking about. It's one thing to give your opinion and say, this is my opinion based on limited knowledge, and that's what I think is right, versus more or less indicting something and you don't know what you're talking about. Because once again, therapy can be very powerful if you get the right therapist, if you get the right treatment interventions, if you get the right diagnosis or not diagnoses, if you get the right interventions when it comes down to helping your mind heal, and if you consistently and adequately do the work. You have to unpack and do the work if you're going to get the best outcomes. If you're not willing to do the work, you ain't going to get the best outcomes. And you'll continue to have circular conversations going from therapist to therapist. Let me tell you guys something that I've seen in my experience with therapy. There are some good people that come into therapy with good intentions and they don't mind doing the work. But there are many people that want you to do all the work, and then they'll sit back and complain later and say therapy don't work. And they hop from therapist to therapist to therapist to therapist, hoping they'll find somebody that will confirm all their biases and their pathologies and tell them what they want to hear. Therapy is not telling you about what you want to hear, but therapy is about being fair, neutral, and balanced and helping you to see the thinking errors that you're dealing with. And so when you get a therapist that can help you see the thinking errors or the cognitive distortions that you're dealing with, then you can start unpacking in a healthy way. But if you get a therapist that tell you what you want to hear, or you go to a therapist that you want to confirm all your biases, then you're not going to get the best outcomes. And so I get it and understand why some black men don't want to go to therapy, why some white men don't want to go to therapy, why some people don't want to go to therapy altogether. Because therapists, many, not all, have become more neoliberal, they have become more woke, and many times when black men go to therapy, they don't feel like they're being heard, they feel like the therapist is biased, or they don't feel like the therapist is culturally competent. Now here's the question. Can a white therapist help you? Can a white therapist help you in your pathologies? Yes. Can a white therapist help you become a better person? Yes. They might not be culturally competent 100%, but you don't always have to be 100% culturally competent to understand symptoms and help that person unpack. Ideally, you want to find a therapist that is culturally competent, but also a therapist that's highly skilled. But once again, therapists do not become proficient until they go do different trials and different tests, and they evolve themselves. Therapists are like apprentice or master technicians. You might understand the theories of what you learned in school, but if you're a first-year therapist in theory is not good as a 10-year or 15-year therapist. Now, you do have therapists that have been around for 15 years, and because they haven't applied themselves, they haven't grown. But ideally, a therapist should be growing and learning new information every year, because we have to get certified or recerted every year. We have to take 40 CEUs a year, every 2 years, to get the proper coursework that either replicate what we've learned or comes up with new information, because therapy is predicated on empiricism, it's predicated on medication, but also as a therapist, I look at therapy, tell clients about homeopathic remedies as well, because I get it, some clients don't want a bunch of medication, they don't like the side effects of traditional medication. And sometimes everything is not medication. I don't think that sometimes we over-medicate people, and we need to take a longitudinal approach or a long-term approach first. Sometimes a client might just need more vitamin D, they might need more sunlight, they might need trace minerals in their diet. That's why many times as therapists, we look at things through what's called a bio-psycho-social spiritual model. We look at things with the bio-psycho-social spiritual model. We look at all 4 areas of the human experience or human existence, and we try to find commonalities, guys, that can help us unpack what's going on. But many times, instead of therapists looking at all angles, they either do it through ignorance or laziness, and they don't give the client the best outcome, the best treatment outcomes, which in essence can hinder that client. Everything is not medication. Sometimes you just need to get some sunlight, learn better coping skills, and also exercise or change your diet or turn that TV off or turn the computer off and get rest. Sometimes you're feeling sluggish or whatnot because you're not getting the proper rest, or there's some kind of abnormality in your body that needs to be addressed. And so once you get that taken care of, sometimes you need medication. There are situations where you do need medication because that's where psychiatrists come in place. And psychiatrists, guys, many times are what you call mind doctors that go to school to understand how chemistry impacts the mind. That's where you get terms like SSRI inhibitors. That's called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Or you got MRISI, whatever you call it. But the body is chemistry and the body is chemical. And so, as I said earlier, therapy can be very viable if you get the right therapist. And Top Gun said that therapy is necessary. And it's very necessary. That's why I tell you guys, don't listen to armchair people on YouTube. Some of them mean well, and some of them I'm cool with, you know? But some of them don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't have the advanced training or the advanced education. And so you can't look at the weirdo therapists like the TikTok therapist or the therapist that says she didn't like black men and say, okay, well, but that's all therapists, so therefore you shouldn't go to therapy, or it's a waste of time. Just like I hear people ignorantly say, that's all therapists do, they say and listen and say and that's not true. One of the things I do when I'm in therapy is that not only do I help clients unpack, and in the therapeutic process, guys, listen, you can guide a client if they struggle with articulating their thought process or feelings. But there's a time when therapists should be listening. Therapy is mostly listening and allowing the client to emote and talk. But I do agree that some therapists need to help the client process, talk, unpack, and share. When a therapist helps the client to unpack, talk, process, and share, that helps the client explore their pathology. Therapists need to ask many times open-ended questions to help the client unpack and share. But to people that say, well, the only thing therapists do is just say, tell me more about it, that's a lie. You don't know what you're talking about. You're ignorant. You're not a competent professional. You don't know what you're talking about. Are there some therapists that just say, how do you feel? Sure, there are therapists that say that, but we got to put it in proper context. And unless we got the evidence to see those randomized therapists to say that, then I can't. It would be improper for me to castigate the profession. And so once again, all therapists just don't say, tell me more about that, or how do you feel? That's an indictment to the profession, and it's ignorance, and it's also disingenuous. Because if you don't Understand therapists or understand why the therapist is doing that, then you should keep your mouth shut because you don't know what you're talking about. So once again, therapy is very broad and therapy is very eclectic. And when you get the right therapist, you can get the better outcomes. But you have to do the work, and then you have to make sure the therapist that you get with matches what you're trying to get out of therapy. The more you know, the more you talk, the more you share, the better the outcomes that you get. But once again, guys, it's a process. It's a very critical it's a very critical process. And getting the right person, getting the right therapist is everything. So once again, stop listening to armchair therapists on YouTube. That some mean well, but many don't know what they're talking about. I heard some people say that certain illnesses don't exist and it's not real. That's a fallacy. The DSM-5 is a book that's predicated in research and is predicated in science. Also, it's predicated in understanding neuroscience and also understand how the mind and body interact together. And so when people say, well, like let's say if a person say, well, anxiety is not real. Well, that's dumb because anxiety is real. let's say if a person say schizophrenia don't exist and it's not real. Well, that's ignorant because schizophrenia is real. If a person say depression is not real, well, that person is ignorant because depression is real. There's a such thing as situational depression that's based on or brought about by situational things, or there can be self-induced depression when you're making bad choices. Situational depression, self-induced depression. But also there's a such thing called clinical depression that has nothing to do with none of that. It's a biochemical abnormality in your mind and your brain that causes you to feel the way that you feel. And your body feels reckless and hopeless. There was a guy recently here in the Tar Heel state. He was a big time golfer, and he took his life due to depression. And some people self-medicate to deal with whatever they're dealing with. But therapy can be a very powerful tool. Jesus was a master therapist. He was a master therapist because he understood the mind, the emotions, and the humanity of the people at the time that he was dealing with. He was a master therapist. He understood the mind. He understood the heart of people. He understood the pain, the good and bad. He understood how to interface and interact with human beings and humankind. But once again, sadly here, guys, in the confines of America, Black people traditionally have not went to therapy. Black people traditionally won't go to therapy. And Black people many times traditionally don't see the benefits of therapy. But the good news is this: you're beginning to see more people go to therapy and get help. And I'm grateful that a lot of my patients see valor in me, that they want to come to me and get help. And I count it an honor to do the work out of all the years of training that I went through, from working in law enforcement to teaching school, and also getting my master's from a Research One institution like University of Chapel Hill. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the things that I've done to become the competent therapist that I am. And listen, the thing about therapists, guys, therapists don't know everything. I don't know everything. I'm still growing. I'm still learning because the profession is always evolving. Now, anything we go and learn in school, some could say is junk science, or some could say it's predicated in politics, or some could say it's predicated in partisan politics, and I agree with that. Sometimes some of the empirical science, or sometimes the empirical data, could be predicated in partisan politics. It should never be that way when you talk about true science, but sometimes it is predicated in partisan politics. I agree with that. But ideally, when you're dealing with therapy or research, you should never have what's called confirmation bias. You should never have confirmation bias. You should be doing things that's not based on bias, but you should more or less be given outcomes that's based on objective truth and objective realities. And so a good therapist look at different treatment models or different theoretical frameworks, and he look at your condition based on your diagnosis and take all those treatment interventions and models and theoretical frameworks and encapsulate or inculcate all those treatment interventions into one to help you get the best outcomes. And so when you're doing the work, the therapist is doing the work, the therapist understands you, the better results that you'll get. Once again, therapy is an evolving process. I'm evolving as a therapist. I'm learning new things. I'm a better therapist now than I was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So if you get with a therapist that might not give you what you want, that therapist could be in the evolution of that therapeutic process. But if you got a 15-year or 20-year therapist and they still being elementary, that means that therapist stopped growing somewhere. And because of that, that might make you think that all therapists suck. But when you hear people talking ignorantly saying that, you know, that's all therapists do is say, tell me about your feelings and all that goofy ish, you don't know what you're talking about, because all therapists don't do that. You know, you can't make that pronouncement or make that assumption if you haven't dealt with every therapist from different backgrounds. So I want to talk about briefly, guys, before I end this stream. I want to talk about this guy named Michael Rainey. And there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of hypocrisy, guys, when it comes down to assault victims or assault victimizations. A lot of hypocrisy. And it's a lot of hypocrisy, once again, guys, because there was a video servicing on TikTok, and shout out to Take Heed to the Message. I heard her talking about it. Saw her talk about it briefly this morning, and I decided to tackle it. But there was a situation early, guys, this morning on TikTok where I saw this man named Michael Rainey Jr. It appears that he was groped by this young girl named Tillis. It appears that he was groped by Tillis' sister, I'm sorry. And it appears that no one did nothing about it, no one said anything about it. But the hypocrisy that a lot of people see is that the hypocrisy a lot of people gotta see is this. If a man do something like that, then all men are bad, and you will never hear the last of it. But this woman going on a live camera, this woman doing it live and in broad daylight, then where's the outrage from the powers that be, the woke brigade, and all the others? See, the problem with social media and the problem with many modern men and women, with many times modern women, is that they love being victims. They lack self-awareness. They're full of hypocrisy, and they see what they want to see through selective amnesia. And I'm gonna see if I can find it. I'm gonna see if I can find it. But I'm gonna see. Actually, I'm gonna go through and read some of the comments from it. Hold tight. But this man was being groped by this man's sister. Michael Rainey was being groped by Tillis' sister, and a lot of times when men go through assault, many times it's minimized or marginalized. It's minimized or marginalized when men go through assaults. So this man was being sexually assaulted live, guys. He was being groped live by another person's sister. And I'm going to read through what Michael Rainey say. It was a live stream. He was being groped through a live stream. But once again, where's the woke brigade? Where are the neoliberals calling this woman out? Where's the woke brigade that says this woman needs to be dealt with, this young girl needs to be dealt with for touching someone improperly? There are a lot of boys that are listening right now, a lot of men that are listening, they have been touched. And when you try to tell your story, people will shame you into silence because they make the false assertion and the false assumption that you're a man, it's okay, and you like it, so therefore you shouldn't say anything. But just like domestic violence, just like essay violence or essay assaults, no one should be touched or hit outside of how they feel. You don't have the right to put your hands on no one, man or woman. But the hypocrisy, guys, once again, continues to be the same. And I'm going to read about Michael Rainey Jr. saying he's processing still after being sexually assaulted on a live stream. The Power Book 2 Ghost actor was grabbed without his consent during an appearance on Ty James' Twitch live stream on June 9th. And this is the actor, guys, this is the person, Michael Rainey Jr. And Jr. speaking out after he was being touched without consent on the live stream. This man was literally being touched on the live stream, guys, and he never got consent. And let's think about Michael Rainey Jr. when it comes down to consent, when it comes down to touching. But we can use that same apparatus when it comes down to consent in relationships. We never consent to black men and ask them what they want in relationships. We never consent in other areas when it comes down to them raising their kids. We minimize the rights and the needs and the proper appropriation of men to the point many men feel like they don't have a voice. And I believe in fairness and justice for all sexes, not just one. But once again, where's the woke brigade on this? Because the woke brigade loves victimization. Where's the woke brigade when it comes down to a man being violated live? Now, can you guys imagine if that had been an athlete or another man doing that to a woman? That man would have been demonized. That man would have been demonized. He would have lost his career and everything. But where's the same energy from the woke brigade on Michael Rainey Jr. being touched and being violated as a man? Where's the same animals or the same animosity? And the truth is, you're not going to get the same animosity because they're full of hypocrisy. What's good for me is not what's good for thee. And the conversation, guys, continue to go on and on and on. The circle of conversation goes on and on and on. This man was being groped on a live a live show, and no one said anything about it. In a statement to people, a rep from Rainey said he is deeply saddened and shocked by the event that occurred during the Ty James stream this past weekend. Once again, this man was touched by a young lady. If I can find the clip, I'm gonna show it to you guys in a minute. This situation is not being taken lightly. The statement continues. Sexual harassment and assault are serious and unacceptable. And of course it's serious and unacceptable when it comes down to men, but you got thousands of boys and men that have been abused sexually and nothing ever happened to the level that they should have been more or less prosecuted. It's happened a lot between a lot of boys and men, but nothing has ever happened, or is often minimized. And that's why, guys, we keep having these circular conversations over and over and over again, because there's a lot of hypocrisy when it comes down to sexual abuse among boys and men. You got men that are listening now that have been abused by someone, but no one want to talk about it. Taking advantage of someone's celebrity in this manner devalues entertainers and underscore the need to respect their humanity. Those who entertain us are human beings just like everyone else. In the videos, James' sisters' hands were being blocked by the children. And listen, this woman did this in front of children, guys. She did it in front of kids, which is also unproblematic. In the video, James' sisters' hands were blocked by children standing in front of her, but Rainey Jr. looked visibly uncomfortable after she approached him. He appeared to reach down in the effort to block her constant contact while looking around for help. The actor reportedly exited the live stream shortly after their encounter. So this man was assaulted on a live stream with a guy by the name of Ty Tillis, or whatever his name is. On his Instagram stories, Junior wrote that he is still in shock and can't take it lightly because I know I would be in serious trouble if the roles were reversed. And he is 100% correct. And so this is a situation where a black man might not go to therapy because he might get a woke therapist to tell him that what he went through is not a big deal. Or that woke therapist might minimize what he went through. Or the women associated with him might minimize what he went through. He might go do a scenario like that. And this man may or may not need therapy because, you know, that's serious to grope somebody on a live stream. She dehumanized this man on a public forum. Come on. This is an unfortunate situation that I can't condone in any way, he wrote. The fact is, sexual assault is never okay, regardless of the gender status. We are all humans and we should respect each other. Most importantly, we should respect ourselves. James took to his Instagram stories to share a statement in response to the clip, writing, after the actions that occurred during my live stream last night, I would like to apologize to Michael and his family for what took place. My little sister was completely wrong and out of line. What she did was very inappropriate and unacceptable. I'm truly embarrassed and disgusted by her actions. The statement continued. And listen, these little girls, some of them are very fast. Some of them have been touched inappropriately. Or some of them just might be fast. They may have never been touched. They just love being inappropriate. And like I said, if it was reversed, if a man or a boy was doing it to a girl or a woman, then that man would have been demonized and his career would have been destroyed. But many times when men are victims of sexual abuse, they either hide it in the shallows or they don't talk about it because people will either shame them or make them, or shame them, minimize them, or make them feel bad for coming out. And that should never happen. I completely respect whatever Michael wants to do in this situation. After watching the clip, I was completely taken aback by what she did. I would take extreme precaution with future streams to avoid similar situations and have banned her from participating in future streams. I do not condone any types of assault. If you're someone who have been sexually assaulted, please contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. So once again, a man gets sexually assaulted, guys, on a live stream, and people minimized it. He got sexual assaulted on a live stream, and it was minimized. Let me show you guys something real quick. Hold on. If you guys can hear me, hit one.
Let's get right down to business. This is an important reminder tonight. Men can also be victims of sexual assault, in case you didn't know.
Yes, men can be victims of sexual assault.
What happened to him after a woman grabbed him inappropriately on a live stream. This happened Sunday on a Twitch live stream for an influencer named Ty Jones. Actor Michael Rainey Jr., who is from Power, can be seen.
And once again, guys, once again, when men go do sexual assault or any form of domestic abuse, it's often minimized because we always dehumanize the experiences of men, and we magnify or more or less give credence to the struggles of women many times. The whole time.
He's in shock, and that quote, sexual assault is never okay regardless of gender or status. We're all human and we should respect each other. Most importantly, we should respect ourselves. Joining us to talk about it, trauma therapist Chow Win. So Chow, when you took a look at that video, what went through your mind?
Well, the reaction on his face.
And so once again, guys, they are generalist therapists, but they are specialized therapists. Like this woman, she's a sexual assault therapist. She's a trauma therapist. Some people specialty is more generalized and broad, like a generalized doctor, but some people are specialists. Some people are trauma-focused therapists. Some people are grief therapists. Even though they have a baseline that's more generalized, it's broad. Hold tight.
Considered a trauma response. We either fight, flight, freeze, we fawn, and it looked like he was freezing. He didn't know what to do.
Right.
He was touched inappropriately. That is sexual violence, and men are victimized by sexual violence as well. 1 in 4, they say, in their lifetime. It's a spectrum. It can be anything from touching to penetration.
And so how do you make the public and people...
Listen to that, guys. 1 in 4 men are violated. 1 in 4 are violated. But once again, the woke brigade won't talk about that because they're more concerned about their own victim Olympics. And anytime men go through whatever they go through because they have a hatred of men, then it's minimized.
A male, you should be able to handle it. You should be able to walk away or confront the person and say, don't do it again. But there should be
recourse. There should be accountability. Look, when a man is touched inappropriately.
Now, guys, listen to what this simp said. He said that a man should say, stop it and say, don't do it again, just like domestic violence. But here's the problem, guys, with domestic violence. There are some people involved in domestic violence where the woman could be bigger than the man. She could be potentially stronger. You got some women that are, on average, the average man is stronger than the average woman, but you got outliers where the woman could be significantly stronger than that man. If she punched that man, she might bust his lip or bust his mouth. But this man say that he should say, well, don't do it again and stop because he's a man. You can't talk equality from down 2 sides of your mouth. And so kudos and shout out to this woman for telling the truth and standing up to the hypocrisy that's often associated with people that have been traumatized or minimized based on their experience. Hold on.
Men have to man up, and there's this issue that, men should be the strong one. It creates a lot of shame and stigma. A lot of men don't even speak up about being sexually violated or a victim of sexual violence because of the cultural stigma and shame around the message that, oh, if you're going to be sexually assaulted as a man, it's okay because you're a man, or you should have spoken out or gotten tough. I mean, we do see these cases. Men are victims of violence. They do come forward. And when they come forward, they often say, are you sure I can talk about it? Are you sure I can address it?
Now, thank God for this. Thank God for this woman that happens to be an Asian woman. Thank God for this dear woman. And once again, guys, what people don't understand many times, as I talked about last week, there's healthy shame and there is unhealthy shame. There's healthy shame and there is unhealthy shame. Healthy shame leads to liberation and the modification of bad behavior, but unhealthy shame keeps you in a suspended cycle of animation. But hold tight, and then we're going to end the stream. Hold on.
And when you have a case like this, when initially the one who held the live stream online, he was like, what's the big deal? Obviously, it was his sister. What's the big deal? I don't see what the problem is. He walked that back later and said he would never condone anything like that. And a lot of people are like, I mean, you know, what's the big deal?
What's the big deal? What's the big deal is somebody touched somebody else without his consent.
Right.
We have to do a better job of talking about consent.
Right.
This is my body, this is your body. You're not allowed to touch it without my permission.
Right.
And it's unfortunate that his initial reaction was, what's the big deal? That is, to me, an imprint, a reflection on sort of the cultural stereotypes when it comes to men and women. And
now, a woman like this, guys, she's an Asian therapist, but her being an Asian don't necessarily minimize her ability to help a man, black or white, based on what he's been through. This woman can help anybody, black or white. She might not be culturally competent in all areas, but you got black women that are therapists, some of them, some, not all, and they might have the skin color that you have, but they're not competent in understanding your struggles as a man. You got culturally competent therapists and you got men therapists that try to understand masculine issues. This woman have a heart for men and what that man went through, and her training can help her and help that client that's been violated unpack and deal with the trauma that he's going to deal with based on that. But the macho brigade will say, oh, you're a man, deal with it, and she's correct. That man is a human being. And what that woman did was highly inappropriate, because once again, you can't say you want to be equal to men and you want to be like men, but yet when you see stuff like this or behavior like this, it's minimized. Hold tight.
Women and sexual violence.
And of course, you have that double standard there, because people would have been up in arms if it was a female, you know, if she was grabbed in a private area like that.
If she was a female, if that was a female that was grabbed, we're probably going to bring the police in. Here we're talking about it. I'm glad you're giving people a platform to talk about it. But you're right, the standards are not the same. They're not equal. She might have been, the police might have called, there was an investigation here. It's like, and the poor actor, what did he
And guys, once again, that's the double standards that we see in society. That is the double standard that we see in society. That's a double standard. So when people say, oh, it's double standards, a man can do this, a man can have sex. It's double standards for both sexes. A man can't be bi-curious or bisexual. Not in America, he can't without being demonized. But there are many women have been with other women. They just don't talk about it, or some of them actually actively talk about it. But that's the hypocrisy, guys, once again, in America.
What did he say? I'm still processing it. He's still in shock. He froze. And he might have to suffer the ramifications because it went so public. I mean, listen, the aftermath of sexual violence is the same for men and women. PTSD, anxiety, depression, avoiding places, flashbacks, nightmares. Can you imagine having to live with a lifetime of that? If you're a man, it doesn't matter.
And do we think the definition matches the term? I think a lot of people lose it there, because if you just touch someone, then you say that's sexual assault.
Right.
And I said just, but if you touch someone, they'll say that's sexual assault. When I think of sexual assault, and when many of us think of sexual assault, and you hear it, you think of rape or something like that, not touching someone. Do you think that's part of the problem?
It is, and this is an opportunity to continue to educate people about sexual assault. It's a spectrum. It starts with touching, it ends at rape, and Anybody can be a victim of sexual assault. Sexual violence is an act that is performed without your consent.
And is it part of our problem as men who say, look, you should be able to handle that, you know, chin up?
It is the cultural stereotype of masculinity and what we call toxic masculinity. You know, man up, do this. We've got to do a better job of talking about this at a very young age, talking about healthy behaviors and how we treat each other. Like that actor said, just as human beings, equal respect.
And a lot of fathers and mothers have this conversation with their daughters. Do you think it's something that now should include their sons?
It should have included their sons long ago.
Right.
Historically, it has not.
It hasn't, and it continues to.
Right.
But we've got to talk to girls, just as we talk to girls about taking care of their bodies and protecting their bodies, we have to talk to boys about the same thing.
I agree.
Because by and large, it's happening.
Now, if you're caught in a situation like this, child, that we saw Michael Rainey in this incident, how would you handle that if you were Michael Rainey?
I think he handled it the best he can, which is being forthcoming.
Once you have your bearings, put it that way, and you're not shocked anymore.
Right.
That person is still there, still being aggressive. How would you handle that?
Oh, to say no
Yeah.
in that moment? You know, he froze. It's a trauma response. That's
Right.
what his limbic system
Right.
went into. He didn't do anything wrong. He did come back and say, look, it's wrong. I'm not sure if he could have done anything more than he did. He was just shocked. And we see that very often. There's one other point I want to make, and people get so confused about this. Look, sexual violence also creates sexual arousal.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you wanted it. It means your body.
Right.
Oh, I'm aroused.
Right. That's called a psychosomatic response. Let me tell you guys something before I end this stream. When I worked in law enforcement, when I worked in prison, R. Kelly was not born R. Kelly. He was born Robert Kelly, but he became R. Kelly based on abuse and trauma that was minimized. That man was minimized and abused. And like I said, he need to go to jail and suffer for what he did. But at the same time, we never humanized what R. Kelly went through. That man went through a lot of trauma, and he went through a lot of pain, and he went through a lot of hurt, and he never got the proper help. So therefore, he became the person that he didn't like. He probably disassociated too. So once again, men go through trauma. Men have been through a lot of abuse. I've had clients tell me they've been touched by women and molested by women. But when it comes down to male issues, the male trauma is often minimized. And when a man starts acting out that behavior, then the same woke brigade that always plays victims and see men as bad, they don't look at the pathology that caused the man to become the predator that he is. And that's the problem, guys. And that's why we need to have this conversation. And that's why I told you guys once again, every person is not a competent therapist. And therapy in itself is very powerful. Stop listening to, once again, some of these people on YouTube that are ignorant and they don't understand how therapy works. And they don't understand that there are good therapists, there are competent therapists, and there are therapists that will help you. Just like there are woke therapists that are ignorant. You got to add nuance and context to all things and everything that you talk about. But when you make a broad stroke, which is a thought disorder, saying, well, therapy don't work and it's a waste of time, or that's all therapists say is, what are you talking about? And then they say, how do you feel? Well, there are dumb therapists that say, how do you feel? And there are incompetent therapists that are ignorant. But that's not all therapists. My clients love me because I help my clients unpack, and I do more than just saying, how do you feel? I'm very intentional about helping my clients and my patients become best. So once again, guys, I appreciate to the people that listen on today. Shout out to Top Gun. He's doing the work. Shout out to Professor Max. He's done the work. And guys, I'm going to end this stream. And I need you guys to understand this. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. Signing off, guys. Y'all be well.